Okay, so next up we have workforce capacity, building models and opportunities. Please welcome Adrian Leighton, PhD, Western Forest Conservation Coordinator, Intermountain West Joint Venture.
I think that might mean that I didn't send in my incredibly boring, incredibly long 2-paragraph introduction, which is probably good for everybody. But let me just a quick little bit of background, because in a way it might become relevant as we talk about the IWJV. I moved to Montana about 26 years ago. When my wife got a job in rural Montana and Flathead Lake, and started kind of accidentally fell into a job in a way at Sotoscutney College, tribal college, that at the time had one of their first degrees was an associate's in forestry, because of the strong connection tribe had with forestry and forest management. That was in the 70s. By the time we got to about year 2003, they still had an associate's degree. They didn't have a forester on faculty, and the agreement with the University of Montana for articulation from the 2 into the 4-year wasn't working very well. So by about 2007, we were able to stand up and graduate a cohort of bachelor students. And to this day, I think SKC probably counts for right around half of the Native American forestry students in the country at any given time. So, and some of them are out there. I don't know if any in the room, but ITC, it's been great to start seeing folks who had gone through the college. Jim's on the board, has been for a long time, and a bunch of us just kind of seeing that success, how these folks are stepping up and being the next generation of leaders, and it's neat to see. So also on top of that, and this will come up a little bit when we talk about capacity, I was on the Indian Forest Management Assessment Team, the 3rd and the 4th. They're congressionally mandated once every 10-year reviews of the state of BIA and tribal forestry and the state of the trust responsibility in forestry. And workforce capacity was one of the mandated questions that had to be answered, and that was part of my responsibilities on both the last 2 IFMATs. So, which kind of led to some pondering about how my new job, I left the college a year and a half ago and started working for Intermountain West Joint Venture. The joint ventures, is anybody familiar with the joint ventures? Wow, usually we get at least one hand. Yeah, and anybody who works for the joint venture can raise their hand, but yeah, or is on the management board. The joint ventures were kind of the concept of the joint ventures came out of federal migratory waterfowl planning efforts back in about 40 years ago. The country's divided up into different sort of bird-based eco units. There's 18 or 19, I can never remember that. 19, thank you. 19 joint ventures. Intermountain West is one of the larger ones. It's basically includes parts of 11 different states, kind of east side Oregon and Washington, all the way down to Arizona and New Mexico, up through part of Wyoming. And it's kind of the core, it has all these core functions around supporting research, science, and collaborative efforts to support bird habitat is kind of at the core of the mission. And some of the major functions are this capacity building model, which we'll talk about it a little bit more in a moment. Communications, and especially really trying to highlight the work of our partners and sort of the positive, voluntary, collaborative efforts that kind of benefit communities and ecosystems when they come together. And then we have a really good science implementation team. It's sort of science tech transfer, science translation, helping kind of convene people to sort of get the academics and the managers in the same room and sort of identify knowledge gaps and really sort of kind of make sure that both ends are kind of talking to each other and that the managers are getting the science that they need on the ground. And then we have a government relations group that kind of keeps track of policy, and we do hill visits once or twice a year. Generally, where the communications and science implementation is sort of 2 core shops. We also have 3 habitat program coordinators. The sort of the habitats that have been around the longest are wetlands and sort of water and wetlands, and then sagebrush and rangelands. A few years ago, the board decided we do have a public-private management board. We're kind of an odd public-private entity. We do have a line item through all the joint ventures receive a line item through Congress to the Fish and Wildlife Service. So we have this sort of federal nexus, which helps us be able to move money through interagency agreements and get it out on the ground. Most of the JV employees are non-federal, and our management board includes federal management folks like Jackie Buchanan from Regional Pacific Northwest Forest Service Regional Forester. We have a regional director for NRCS in the West. There's a BLM representation, state fish and wildlife agencies. We have got ranchers, industry, the electrical companies, sort of a wide gamut of voices to kind of help us sort of find the right direction and the right way to lever partnerships and to help. Forestry was created as a new habitat type just a few years ago, and the priority areas with the Intermountain West, the board and the Western Forest Committee that was formed by the board identified were these sort of dry frequent fire forests, especially the sort of the ponderosa pine stands, and then pinyon juniper woodlands. Kind of what were so our major kind of goals or the vision is this, bird-centered conservation. We maybe some joint ventures are a little more birdy than others. Birds are certainly very important to our core mission, but we are really looking at we think that when you do good, solid, active management that benefits ecosystems, especially anything that's restoring fire regimes, you're also benefiting all the critters that have lived there and are part of that system. So, and then we want to reduce wildfire risk and help with and the relevancy to people and to build strong communities in these kind of rural areas. Most of our work so far has been really more on the active forest management and fuels reduction side. Jim's kind of always challenging us to think more about how we can help on the prescribed fire and the cultural burning side, and we're definitely ready to see how our model can, and I would appreciate if you all think about how once I explain this model, if I explain it coherently, how we can maybe help with the needs of the fire side of the equation, the burn crews, the fire and fuels departments for tribes and others. We really are trying to look at risk reduction, habitat conservation, and then restoration really seems to be the lens for that, especially in these dry frequent fire forests. And kind of anything we can do to overall create healthier forests and ecosystems. That's what we're trying to help with. I know there's a lot of other people doing that. Compared to some of our other habitat types, this might be a slightly more, not crowded field, but there's a lot more going on. And we're still trying to figure out the best way that, if we can be a help. And one of those really is this capacity model. And this was fascinating to me to come back to my experience with the IFMAT 3 and 4. One of the paradoxes, if you read the IFMAT reports, if anybody has, one of the paradoxes around tribal forestry is they are, do some of the best kind of ecosystem holistic forest management out there when you compare them to others, and yet they receive something like 38 cents on the dollar to a national forest, right? So they're underfunded and yet very high performing, but there is a fundamental capacity problem. And that's something that struck me over on field visits. Even when we were when I was teaching, we take students out into the field. And I remember one day, right after the Farm Bill created the Good Neighbor Authority opportunity included tribes and counties and Good Neighbor Authority. And one of the students, pretty excited, and asked a tribal forester, he's like, "Are you guys going to do G&A now that you've got it?" And the forester just kind of looked down and looked at him and said, "We can't get our own stuff done. Why would we do that?" So, this basic fundamental capacity issue is one that sort of keeps coming up. And when I first started the job, having conversations with coworkers and then with some of the folks like Howard Teasley and Sean DeFrance from NSPERS and CSKT respectively, about whether this model would be a good fit for tribes, whether we could actually move money through interagency agreements and then get that money to the tribes to hire people so they could start to engage in the projects. Because the thing that really kind of strikes me, especially in G&A, is you can be offered dozens of projects, millions of dollars worth of projects, but you don't have the people to go to the meetings, you don't have the people to get started with all of that and get into the planning, develop the relationships. It's not going to happen. So, it's always felt like some states that can invest up front in the people then go through, it's not really a level playing field. And while we didn't want to get in the way of kind of tribal relationships with federal agencies by any means, if we could kind of help just move like starter packages of money to the tribes, this seemed like a good place. And we were talking to some underfunded state forestry departments, like in Wyoming, or fish and wildlife departments that want to do good neighbor authority state fish and wildlife departments. I think there's a lot of opportunities to use this model, but there's a clear need with tribes. And so what we've kind of gotten to, and then we've been able to talk to Nature Conservancy and some other folks who are kind of interested in maybe helping with this process, a little bit of joint support, maybe a little bit of leveraging of non-federal funds to the Forest Service. It seems to be very focused on return on investment, and any kind of even small kind of contributions, leveraged funds go a long way. And so where we've gotten to right now in what was Region 6, but in Oregon and Washington, is we're currently working with the Pacific Northwest region, their folks, to get an agreement that would bring $5 million through the IWJ Fish and Wildlife Service agreement out to the four tribes in order to put folks on the ground and starting to engage in more good neighbor authority work. And the nice thing about this is it's totally flexible. It can be, those positions can be whatever is needed to widen the bottleneck. It can be, we've talked to folks about if you need an archaeologist, if you need, a road engineer, if you need an admin person or a grants and contracts person, if you need a planner, certainly if you need a forester or three, this would be the place, whatever combination for your unique situation with your neighboring national forests, this would be the way to do it. And in the Pacific Northwest, we were able, we started these conversations last year at a time when, the executive order on timber production came through, and there was, the Forest Service had access to some money through USDA to support meeting those new timber targets. And so it was really very easy to kind of fit into that. They had reduced personnel. A lot of the national forests were kind of, over the years, had come up with very good or improving relationships with tribes. And there was sort of, everything was ready to go. It just needed a little bit of extra help. And so we're looking at least 5 or 6 national forests working with the 4 tribes to really sort of start moving through the kind of active management, focusing on sort of fuels reduction and improving health and resilience. So, and this is where, and the 4 tribes, are Yakima, Colville, Cow Creek, Band of Umpqua, and the Kalispel tribe in Idaho. And, and again, they're doing a lot of active management around fire reduction. We haven't really so a lot of this management is got of a fuels basis, but knowing that this group's probably, doing both fuels and active fire, we kind of want to see how we can support outside that. That was our first agreement. It was kind of, again, there was a lot of focus there on the Forest Service side. It fit in well, but again, if of a tribe that's got some bottlenecks that wants to get more done on the ground, putting fire back on the ground, and whatever it may be, admin to planning to Do you need folks to write burn plans or whatever it may be? This model can kind of help. Again, we can kind of help talk to the Forest Service, talk to other folks, try to find the funding that we can then transfer over to the tribe. And then we also generally try to provide support, not only the reporting back to the Forest Service and that sort of grant side, just to ease the administrative burden for the tribes, but also some kind of coordination. We tend to do, like to do communities of practice with our capacity folks. We have somewhere in the vicinity of about 30 capacity positions in the other two habitat types. Is that about right, 30-ish? 40? Okay. Great, and that was, a lot of that is in sagebrush and rangelands. A lot of that funding comes from the BLM. A lot of NRCS work around flood irrigated wetlands and beaver dam analogs and some of the low-tech tools and models in that space. And we're kind of hoping to build up something similar in forestry. And in both of those cases, there's been our science implementation folks have put together communities of practice where, they get all of those folks talking, others can join in, identifying what do you need to learn more about, maybe, I know the Sagebrush and Rangeland group just did a community of practice where they had an expert from the Imagine Network, Ryan Naylor, talk about what we know about, especially cheatgrass and rejuvera, and it was actually a really, really good talk, and I realized after an hour I was totally paying attention to conversations around rotor wash and tank mix and spraying of cheatgrass, and it's like, how did that happen? He's got to be really good. But trying to put together these sorts of community practice to support people in their kind of information needs. We're doing some efforts right now in pinyon juniper woodlands, especially because it seems like there's a lot more being done, sort of being driven by fuels reduction and wildfire risk, and also on the conifer encroachment side, but there often isn't a lot of coordinated conversations between, say, the fuels folks and agency wildlife folks. In the BLM, we coordinated some conversations and trying to get everyone to think together about what is a healthy woodland, trying to find what the science and maybe some spatial tools, mapping tools that would help guide sort of research-driven tools that would help guide managers make decisions, or at least have informed conversations with each other about management activities there. And then we also have a really strong communications team. Emily Downing, my colleague, has sort of graciously agreed to kind of start doing stories in the new forestry program. And so these are all, again, very kind of partner focused, highlights positive boots on the ground work. We can help, again, when it's a capacity issue, ghostwriting is not a great word, but we can actually help, get those stories out for folks if that's what they want, if they just don't have the time to write the stories or the kind of the skills to get out what they're doing, we can help with that. And then again, we in a different presentation, we had a whole slide of all of these different kind of media things, sort of, especially in the sagebrush and PJ woodlands. Sometimes the media it's like sage grouse versus pinyon jay, and these sort of often false trade-offs that really tend to polarize rather than kind of guide to the common ground. So that's kind of, again, just an overview. I know this isn't super fire specific for this group, but it is a model. I would love to explore if anybody's got interest about how we could maybe help in that. If you're not in the Intermountain West joint venture, we can certainly try to put you in touch with the other joint ventures, the one that's in your region. It's kind of a mix about how active they are in forestry, but we'd certainly love to help you connect the dots if that is something you want to do. And so, yeah, how can we help? And thanks. I just want to, Andrew Olson, who's the Habitat Coordinator, is in the room. Emily on our communications team is as well, and be happy to talk with you if there's anything, I'm happy to answer questions. I'm not trying to get out of that, but, but we're all here if you wanted to learn more. And that's about it.
Can you highlight a little bit about some of the work that they've done with tribes or on tribal land? I know that some of the
So we went out and did some communications showing that the updates made to that infrastructure and some of the goals that the tribe was then able to use that communications to kind of say, hey, like this is some of the
Another
work
one
we've been doing.
was on Wind River, right?
Mhm.
I don't know, I don't remember what that one was, but certainly have an experience or have some history in working with tribes on conservation issues. I think that this new capacity building model is unique, and I think could be utilized to greater extent to help tribes build capacity, right, where needed, or fill gaps, capacity gaps where needed, right, to do the work that they want.
And unintentionally remission, Jim is on our management board and brings the ITC's perspective and his own perspective to the board as well. And it's done.
Yeah, 70% of the tribal members live in urban areas. How are you connecting or recruiting in that large population?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, but I mean, for the joint venture, we're really more helping trying to help tribes and other partners get things done. We're more of a kind of a matchmaker of funding and overall support. So we don't recruit folks directly. We're certainly, I think, and we've done some comms, but our audience is often kind of broader in terms of not necessarily targeted at like urban youth or folks in certain.
Well, I thought, and I'm guessing that Kalispell is recruiting from the Spokane area, since they have their casino right there next to town, and there is like a Spokane Indian urban group, and I believe they, maybe even Colville does. I haven't talked with Cody or them, but I would suspect that Kalispell's recruiting out of that, because the tribal members would be around, like even my own family, our own Coeur d'Alene families in town, and the Coeur d'Alene tribe connects with the Spokane group, but I'm just wondering with the examples of the tribes you mentioned, that I'm going to guess that Kalispell goes down to Spokane to work with that group.
Yeah, and I don't know how much, they're a pretty small program, how much active recruiting they do, and it's something we could certainly help them with if they wanted help in just, getting, whether it's getting the word out different ways, but they probably do.
Adrian, I think a key point on this is with working with these tribes, they're tribal employees, and so it's up to the tribes how they would like to pursue recruitment. If they want assistance, we're capable of doing that.
Exactly.
Help partners advertise nationally for positions and have pretty good success on that. But if it's a really targeted recruitment or something, that's one of the nice things of positions is they can be very hands off. We're not, managing day to day what the positions need. We're just creating the vehicle to get people the bodies that they need to get work done. But they're totally supervised and managed by the tribes themselves, and including the recruitment process, unless they would like us to assist.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.